Hello.
Anthony,
Hello. Sorry, I got a problem.
no worries. Let me make you host, or
Okay.
let me make you co-host because I'm gonna stay here in the thing for a little bit.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Um, I I haven't seen what's the name of the girl? I'm assuming that it's a girl,
Mary.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mary.
I haven't seen her log in. I haven't seen anybody logged in, as a matter of fact. So, and right now I'm actually doing this from. Actually, let me show you.
Okay.
Ta-da! I'm actually
Okay.
in Bohol
Oh, again.
at the beach. Yeah, again, I'm at the beach
Wow.
again. Okay, hold on a
Wow.
second. Meet
Good
my
thing for
friend
you.
Irene.
I haven't really done
Meet,
any vacation.
meet my friend Irene. Irene, say hello.
Hello.
Irene says hello. Anyway, so I'm here again, but nobody has joined. I joined a little bit
Okay,
early to see if anybody would start, but I haven't seen anybody yet.
I'll check the link, I guess.
Okay. Anyway, I'll be here as soon as you want me to start. Let me know, and we'll go ahead and start.
Okay, yeah. Let me
All right. Thanks,
Thanks.
Anthony.
Thanks, Johnny. Enjoy. Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Is it good afternoon?
Oo, 12, mag-12. Diyan
Sorry.
gabi na, no? 7?
Yes,
Oh.
yes. Parang may problem yung meetup uh, Zoom link ha.
May
Sorry.
problem?
Yeah, I actually checked the meetup and then I
Mm.
saw nawala yung Zoom link so
Oo nga,
I
kanina kasi nung umaga, dun ko rin
ah,
chinek.
oh.
Kaya nag-send ako message.
Okay. Kasi what kaya? So yeah, so I just actually just messaged so refresh ko nga. So we might
Kamusta
have
ka
some
naman,
delay.
Anthony?
Pagod. Pagod.
Pagod.
Dami ginagawa late, to be
Okay,
honest.
ano pa ba yung COVID dyan sa Philippines? Like, marami pa rin cases.
I think di pa medyo alert level 1 na. So,
Bumaba na.
maba na. Yes. By the way, Jan is here as well. So, siya yung ating
Hello.
co-organizer.
Hello,
Okay.
Johnny.
Nasa Bohol
Oh,
siya
hi. Very nice to
right
meet you,
now.
Marie.
Yan. Okay. Johnny will be recording this session, right? Will this be posted
Yes, we'll
in
be
the site?
recording the session. You guys can start, whenever you want. Just let me know when you're starting, and we're good to go.
Okay.
Are we also broadcasting this in our Facebook? No.
We are. It's in the Facebook group for
Okay.
for
Okay.
Cypress IO and in YouTube as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Turn ko na lang yung camera ko pag mag-start na.
Yes, so mukhang may delay to start. Sorry. I
Okay
didn't
lang.
realize na
Hmm.
actually chinek ko ba kayo ng umaga yun, to be honest.
Yung anak ko din nasa bahay, nasa taas. So hopefully, hindi siya masyadong marinig.
lunch break mo lang to, right?
Oo. Actually, nag-off sick ako kasi nagka-COVID yung daughter ko. So, yung symptoms niya nag-worsen like over the weekend. And then nag-PCR siya, positive. Ako naman negative, pero yung like feeling mo na may colds ka, like
Oo.
yung throat, makate. So, puro lemon and ginger tea ako ngayon.
Ayun pala, meron na pala mga meron ng 4.
Ay, nandito na
Okay.
pala.
Ano?
Mag-start na lang, right? Exactly 12 or do you want to start maybe 2 minutes after? Or...
Mga 2 minutes after and then to record it and broadcast na naman yung session. So,
Sige.
we might not able to reach yung number of attendees in the Zoom, I
Yeah,
guess.
okay.
Yeah, iba naman kasi they actually watch din naman ng recording. So yun. So thank you.
Oo, kasi na-cancel ko nung 24th of Feb. So, buti ngayon na ano rin, natuloy din.
Condolence pala.
Thank you.
Mag-share na lang ako ng screen ko.
Let me know if we're starting so I can start recording.
I'll be sharing my screen and then I think we'll be starting in 2 minutes. Ayan. Mary, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Okay. So we will start na lang on time. I know you're still busy as well. I think, Johnny, we can start. Johnny. Okay, so again, welcome to Cypress PH. Okay, this is our first meetup for 2022. So I guess you're very much familiar with Mary Drake. It's been in different conferences lately, and also um, with different talks as well. So for today, we will have a collection of my favorite Cypress features by Maria Drake. So we might probably need to wait for 1 minute at least. I think we have some problem with Zoom link earlier. So it was only posted, well, technically 5 minutes. So it was posted in the morning, and I really didn't thought that it was gone when you check it. So yeah, and so while waiting, probably we could probably start, I guess, because I know Mary is this is just her lunchtime. Okay.
Yeah, lunch. It's 12 o'clock here.
Okay. Yeah. So again, this session will be recorded, and this is also being broadcasted via Facebook and YouTube as well. So we have also slide question. I'll post the link later. And while waiting, you could also visit cypressio.ph as our group. And I'm your host, Anthony Shumal. And we have also Richmond, our co-host. Okay, but this is not around. Maybe in our future Cypress meetup. And of course, we have Johnny, who's also co-organizing today as well. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to pass to Mary for this session. So I'll do your introduction, um, I guess. So let's start. So stop sharing my screen.
Cool. Let me just try to share my screen. Um, okay. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay.
Yes.
And yeah, as Anthony said, for this session, I would like to talk about a collection of my favorite Cypress features. So just a quick introduction to anyone who doesn't know me. So my name is Marie Drake. I'm currently a quality engineering manager here in Zoopla. So I'm based over here in London, England. I've been using Cypress for almost 3 years now, and I've given different talks ranging from introduction to Cypress, or how you can use Cypress for API testing, how to handle iframes, and talks like how you can even integrate it into a continuous integration pipeline. So in this talk, I would like to share with you all my favorite Cypress features, and also share some features that aren't as well known, that people might find useful. So if you have any questions, just post it on the Slido app. But if you want to get in touch with me after this session, you can find me on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter at mcruisedrake, or you can also have a look at my blog. I have a contact form there. So it's mariedrake.com. Okay, so everyone is probably familiar with Sound of Music. So as Julie Andrews said, these are just a few of my favorite things. So my first favorite feature is the Cypress Test Runner itself. So I'm a very visual type of person. So when running this test, I learn more about the application if I can see how it works visually. So most of you might already be familiar with the Cypress Test Runner, but to those who's not quite familiar with it, the Cypress Test Runner displays all the test files that you have within your Cypress test framework. You can search these files easily, and from the test runner, you can even create a new test file directly from it. And if you have updated, your Cypress version to a much more later versions, you can also see which browsers are available for you to run your test locally. So at the moment, Cypress can support running your tests against Firefox, Edge, and the Electron browser. The great thing about this is you can easily switch to these browsers without having to restart the test runner. So from the test runner itself, you can also see some basic configuration about Cypress. So you can see the version of node that you're using. You can find, list of experiments that you might have enabled. And I'll actually talk about one of their experimental feature later. So you'll find all the different configurations here. It also gives you information about which version of Cypress you're using, and of course, a link to their changelog. So I think Cypress is now on version 9 point something. So when I took this screenshot, I was still on version 8.7. But yeah, this gives a visual indicator as to what version of Cypress you're using. Now, once you've actually selected a file to run, the Cypress test runner will display all the tests that you have written on that specific file. Now, what I like particularly about the test runner is that every time you make some code changes that's related to your tests, Cypress will automatically rerun your tests without you having to relaunch the test runner. The other thing that I quite like about the Cypress test runner is it has a built-in feature called the selector playground. What the selector playground is it's a handy additional tool that you can use to find out what the selector is for the element that you wish to interact. From the Cypress test runner, you can just copy the selector directly to whatever code editor you prefer to use. And what's also great about the test runner is because Cypress runs inside the browser, when you right click on the Cypress test runner, you have access to the Chrome developer tools, which makes it easier to debug your tests. Every time you click on a test command, so you can see here, I've clicked on the wait command, additional logs related to this command will be printed on the console. Now, moving on to my second favorite feature, and this is how Cypress handles the network requests. Now, Cypress has built-in methods already to intercept the network request, so you can spy for the network calls, and you can also wait for it to finish before performing other actions. On previous versions, so some of you might know that Cypress can only intercept XHR calls, but now they've introduced a much more powerful Intercept method. And how is this different is with the Intercept, this can actually intercept all types of network requests, so including fetch calls, CSS calls. So it's much more powerful than the like server and root that was previously there before. So here's just a quick example of how to use the Intercept. So if you want to match, let's say, all requests by default, whether it's a get request, a post request, so by default, you don't have to pass in that specific method. So as you can see here, I'm only passing in the URL that I want to intercept. So in this particular example, I want to intercept all calls related to search slash photos and my query parameter. Now, whenever Cypress detects this network call, and if the URL matches, the call will be intercepted, and you can then do some follow-up action. So depending on what your requirements is, you can do actions such as spying the call. You can do an alias. So as you can see here, I've added an alias here that it should be referred to as an invalid search results. You can also modify any of the request headers or any of the responses. So it's pretty like powerful. Now, going back to the Cypress test runner, whenever you run the tests where you've actually intercept the call, you might notice that there is a failed circular indicator beside the network call. You can also see that the alias, so which I've called invalid search results, is also present on the Cypress test runner. Now, whenever you intercept any calls, so within the Cypress test runner, Cypress creates a routes table which shows any network calls that you have intercepted. So it shows what the match methods are, and in this case, I've basically said that it should match everything. The root matcher is the URL, whether it's been stubbed or not. So in this case, we're not using any like stubs or mocks, any aliases, and then the number of match requests. So now that now that I've shown you how to intercept network requests, my third favorite feature is still related to it. So Cypress can intercept network calls. That means that you can also stop the responses, so you have better control of your tests. Now, this will allow you to have stable tests because you're testing the functionality of your application solely without relying too much on actual network calls. Now, to stop a network call, again, it's the same command, so intercept. And in this particular example, I only want to stop the get request. So this time, I'm passing in the get method followed by the URL that I want to, stop. And then I am returning a fixture data. So this fixture data is an example of mock data that I've called unsplash.json. So this is just a static file which returns, like similar set of data that I want the get request to return. So as you can see, this is what my JSON file looks like. It's just basically mock data, and this is the information that I want the API request to return. Now, whenever you run your test, you can see that my search results is now returning the mock data that I have specified. Now I have, better confidence that my test will not break, even if the API that my application is using has gone offline or there's some like issues. Looking at the routes, table again, you can see that the get request to the root matcher has been stubbed. So yes has been passed in to the column stub, and you can see that we've still got the alias. In this case, it's called mock data, and it's been intercepted one time. Now, if you don't want to use fixtures, you can also pass in the actual response object. So for this example, I wanted to mimic the scenario where the search results is empty. So let's say, for example, that I've chosen a query parameter that doesn't have any like search results. So in that case, I still want my status code to be 200, but then the actual body would be empty because we want the API to not return anything. Now, whenever the test is run, so you might notice that there's now two circular indicators here. One that's failed. So if you recall, if it's failed, that means that an actual network request has been made. And then the other one is it's not failed. So if a circular indicator is not failed, it means that the request has been stubbed with a predefined response. Moving on to my fourth one, and let's just imagine if you have a failing test that's running in your CI pipelines, and the error logs are really useful, but um, like I said, for me, I'm a very visual, type of person. So I really find that the automatic screenshots and the videos really useful whenever I'm debugging why my tests are failing. So the next favorite feature that I want to share with you is all about Cypress's screenshots and videos. To anyone who doesn't know, so whenever you run your tests, headlessly, so if you run npx cypress run, um, automatically videos are actually generated after each test run. So this will, create a new folder called videos into your Cypress folder structure, and the videos that are generated will be saved in that location. Now, if you want to make some adjustments, so this is really configurable. So let's say you only want to generate a video every time a test is failing. So what you can do is on your cypress.json file, you just need to set video upload on pauses and set that to false. On the other hand, if you really don't want any videos, at all to be generated, Cypress also gives you that configuration. So you just need to set video to false. Now, on the other hand, whenever you run your test headlessly again, and just imagine that there are some failing tests. Now, Cypress will actually generate a screenshot automatically for any tests that have failed. Similar with the videos folder, a new folder called screenshots, it will be created automatically, and then the screenshot will be saved in that location. Again, if you don't want Cypress to take a screenshot when a test fails, I can't really think as to why you won't need this feature, but for me, this is really, really handy. But let's just say that, you don't want the screenshots to be generated. You can also override the configuration in your cypress.json file by setting screenshot on run failure to false. As a general tip, whenever your test fails in your CI pipeline, it's really useful that your screenshots and your videos are added as artifacts. So it basically enables the engineers in your team to see why a test has failed rather than relying on you. So if you're not adding these as artifacts, then please do add it. If you want to take it a bit further as well, so I know some of you prefers like HTML reports. There is a plugin that you can use called Mocha Awesome, which will basically generate a HTML report for your Cypress test run. So you can also attach like screenshots to this report by doing some extra configuration. So what you can do is if you're interested in doing this, I've written a really quick like blog post here, which you can find here on this link here. So I can share the slides after, but basically I've written a step-by-step like tutorial on how you can generate this HTML report with the screenshots added. Now, speaking of plugins, Cypress actually has a great collection of plugins. So the next ones that I'm about to share are all focused on some of my favorite plugins in Cypress. Now, for my next favorite, feature, and this might be a bit controversial to some because I know that code coverage is not the best measure for, like checking that you have like high quality tests. But this is something that I've found really useful in the past. So while code coverage is not the best, measure, it does give you a clear indicator as to, what areas of your code, has been overly tested and which areas have not been tested at all. Now, if you want to measure your code coverage with Cypress, there is a plugin called Cypress Code Coverage, which you can integrate very easily. Before I dive into how you can integrate this plugin, how does code coverage actually work? So code coverage tools, they work by actually scanning your application source code, and they insert additional like counters to different branches, to different statements, to different lines, or even like functions from your application. Now, every time your automated tests hit the different areas on the code base, these counters will increment. Once a test has finished, the total number of hits will be compared, or it will be recorded against the total number of the possible hits. To integrate this plugin, it's very straightforward. So you just need to install the plugin. And after you've installed the plugin, we can go to Cypress/plugins index.js file. And we just need to register this plugin. So we need to require the actual plugin and then just do some additional configuration to return the config. This is very important according to the document. So if you get a bit stuck, then always look at the actual like installation guide on how to install. But this is like the simplest way to install the plugin. After you've registered the plugin, the next step is to actually import the commands that you would need. So to do this, you just need to go into your Cypress support index.js file and then import the actual support commands. Registering the plugin is not enough because you also need to instrument your code first. So instrumenting your code, this is actually so this can be a very quick task depending if your projects are using Babel already. So if you're using other like compilers, then it can be done as well. But for this talk, I've just focused on how you can use the Babel plugin. To me, this is the easiest way of instrumenting your code, but alternatively, you can use other tools like NYC. So NYC is quite popular, but again, I will not cover that as part of this talk. So to register this plugin, you just need to update your Babel RC file. If you're not sure how to do this, again, speak to your developers, and you just need to basically add this plugin into your, like, let's say you have a test environment for your setup, then you just need to add the Istanbul plugin, and that should like really be it. Whenever you run your test now, so you can see that there's additional logs on your Cypress test runner that gets generated. So you can see here that before all, there is a logs that basically resets the code coverage logs. And then after each of the tests, it will basically save the code coverage like for you. So the final output of this, it could be an HTML file. So you can see on the next slide that an HTML report was generated after the test run, which shows you all the different, files in your code. It shows you like what the percentage are for, each of the execution. So you could see what the statement percentage is, the branches, the functions, and the lines. So this should then give you a clear idea as to which files you have been overly testing and which files require additional coverage. As a general tip, so if your team is using both Jest and Cypress, and if you want to have a single view of the HTML code coverage report, then you can combine them. So I wrote a tutorial here again, which you can find in this link. So you can combine these two reports, which basically enables just a unified view of the code coverage for your project. Cool. My sixth favorite feature is the accessibility plugin. So I'm a massive fan of utilizing automation to cover some of the basic accessibility checks. And if you've taken, so I have a test automation course around how we can do automated accessibility, then you'll know which plugin that I'm referring to. And this plugin is called Cypress Axe. So Cypress Axe is a plugin that is based on the Axe Core library. So Axe Core is quite a popular library out there for writing automated tests. So they also support other programming languages, other frameworks, and it's really great that Cypress has a plugin for it. I've used this a couple of times in the past, and our team here in Zoopla are currently using Cypress Axe, and it's a great way to leverage the Cypress framework to also cover the basic accessibility checks. So the first step that you need to do, you just need to install the dependencies. So you need to install both Cypress Axe as well as Axe Core. And then in terms of integrating it, it's really simple. So you just need to update your Cypress support index.js file, and then you just need to import the Cypress Axe, and that is pretty much it. Now, once this plugin has been integrated, this will introduce some additional commands that you can use within your Cypress test framework. So the first one is sci.inject_axe. This command, it will actually inject the Axe Core, runtime in your test application. So this has to be added after you visit your page. And then the next command, the check accessibility. So this will actually scan your entire page for any accessibility failures. So the simplest way to get started with accessibility, with automated accessibility per se, is if you just pick, some random pages from your website, and then just scan the entire page. That should give you some indication as to what accessibility issues you have, what's the severity, what are the elements that are impacted, and so on. Of course, you can customize this. So if you don't want to scan the entire page, let's say you want to exclude specific elements. Just imagine that these specific elements are still in progress, so you don't necessarily want to test them for accessibility just yet. So what you can do is you can pass in a list of elements that you want to exclude, from the scan. Alternatively, so if you don't want to exclude specific elements, because it can get quite long to add all these different elements, then you can also just check a specific element. So in this case, I'm passing in a specific selector, and I only want to scan that specific selector. So it will ignore all the other elements in the page. Lastly, if you have some extra complex scenarios and you want to disable some accessibility rules, you can also do this, but just communicate with your team that you want to disable it for now, because let's say maybe this is still being worked on. So you can just pass in the actual rule that was failing. So in this example, I just want to disable the color contrast rule for now. Now, whenever you run the tests, once you've integrated the plugin, you can see on the screenshot here that Cypress Axe has detected some accessibility errors. You can see that there's errors around the heading order, landmark 1 main, and also page has heading 1. Heading order, I think this is quite a straightforward one, because we just need to make sure that the headings are in order, because that can impact the way, let's say, a screen reader reads your website. However, the other two rules, especially if you're not quite familiar yet with accessibility, it can be quite confusing. So what I like about this plugin is, as testers, we basically need to understand what these different violations mean, so we can explain it better, to our team. And because we know that you have access to the developer tools console, whenever you click on a specific violation, Cypress Acts will provide more information about these different violations. So you can get a description as to what accessibility rule you have broken. There is also a very useful help URL which you can just access directly. You should see like relevant information there on how to fix the issue. You can also see the impact, and this impact here can be really useful. So if you have a plan to tackle accessibility issues within your team, but let's say you only want to focus on like the high severity like issues, then you can use this to basically filter out which rules you have to prioritize first. So you can filter out like the high severity ones, and then maybe like the moderate or like the minor ones, then you can just fix that on a later sprint. So having this impact is really useful because you can then communicate to your team what's the risk of not actually fixing this issue. As a general tip, and I know this isn't a Cypress tip, but a general accessibility tip is, even though the automated tools can only catch about like 20 to 40% of issues, it's still a very good idea to introduce this earlier on in your projects. Because if you've integrated it earlier on, you can just focus on like the really like tasks that are that needs human intervention. So if we think about accessibility, we still need to test with like screen readers. We still need to check if it has like the correct like keyboard navigation. So you can reduce a lot of the tedious tasks by introducing an automated accessibility tool earlier on. And this also mean that if you're working on a new project, every time your developer makes some code changes, they get an idea if they have introduced an accessibility violation. And if they have, they can fix it much more earlier. Cool. So the next plugin, it's a non-functional requirement as well. And this is something that I have enjoyed using, and it's the Cypress Audit performance plugin. So this can give you an indication on what your web performance is. And how does it integrate, or how does it relate with Cypress? So there's a custom plugin. So it's called Cypress Audit. Similar with the Cypress Acts, it leverages your existing Cypress tests, and it introduces additional commands that you can use to actually check the performance of any pages. Now, once you've introduced this doesn't automatically mean that you should use Cypress for all your performance testing needs. There are other, better tools out there that are much equipped, to do the performance. So especially if you want to do some like load testing or some stress testing, then Cypress Audit isn't the tool for you. However, what this plugin offers is a way to easily track your Google Lighthouse scores by extending the default functionality of Cypress. So let's say you don't want to use the Lighthouse CLI. So the Lighthouse CLI is it's a way for you to basically check the performance of your application via the command line. And if your team is already using Cypress, you can just reuse the same framework, add this plugin, so at least you're not using like multiple tools. So that's the biggest benefit that I've seen for actually using this. Now, after installing Cypress Audit, to integrate this plugin, you just need to basically update the plugin /index.js file. So it might look a bit complex, so I'll just explain this in a very high level. But basically, what we're saying here is every time we launch the browser, so Cypress can actually listen to different events, and one of this event is called before browser launch. So every time Cypress detects that we're opening the browser, so before that, we're actually going to try and prepare the audit. This is needed because if you've used Google Lighthouse CLI in the past, whenever you want to run performance checks, it actually opens up. Oh, sorry, it actually opens up a new web browser whenever you do the audit. Now, we also know that in Cypress, it also opens up the visual test runner, which loads the Chrome browser. Because we want the Lighthouse test to run inside the same browser as Cypress, this is why we need to add the following code. So it's basically just telling Lighthouse to, rather than opening up a new browser, we're going to use the same browser as Cypress is using. After you've done that, the final step is just to update your Cypress support commands, or you can also update the Cypress support index.js file, but you just need to import the actual commands to make Cypress aware of the new commands that we're going to use. Now, to start the audit, after you've run the page, you just need to call site.lighthouse, and this is basically running it on the default configuration that Lighthouse CLI is using. And whenever you run this test, you'll see that once the audit is finished, you can see the results of the tests within the Cypress test runner. And because by default we didn't pass any thresholds, Cypress Audit will run the test based on a score of 100 for every metrics. That's not, realistic, especially with, a lot of our applications. Like, there is not going to be, it's not going to like achieve 100 metrics for each of these different metrics. So what you can do, of course, is you can override any of the metrics and thresholds depending on what your requirements are. To do that, so what you can do is you can simply pass in a custom object. So in this code snippet here, I have an object called thresholds, and in this object, I've defined what my performance threshold should be. So I'm saying that it should be 50 for now, and then accessibility is 80. You can also try to define specific thresholds for different performance rules. So if you've used Lighthouse CLI or Lighthouse in general, you'll know that a couple of web performance metrics are there, out there is around the first contentful paint or the largest contentful paint. So you can set what the default threshold is for that, and this is in milliseconds. And other things as well. So if you're also interested in tracking your SEO, then you can just define a specific threshold for that. By default, so the Lighthouse CLI will actually run it on the mobile, viewport. If you want to override this, of course, then you can also create another object which basically runs it on a desktop view. So for this example, I've set the form factor to desktop, and screen emulation, I've just disabled that. So in order for you to find out what these different properties that you need to check, you need to know what the Lighthouse CLI configuration is. So whenever I did this configuration, I had to look back at the main Lighthouse CLI config and actually just check what is the actual property that I need to override to set it so that I can run my tests using the desktop view. And then now that you have defined those custom objects, you can just use the site.lighthouse command and then pass in these custom configurations. General tip, the Lighthouse score, it's a good indicator of performance, but don't rely on it 100% of the time. The plugin will give you an indication of where potential problems might be, and because it's based on using Lighthouse, this is just synthetic testing. So don't take the scores religiously. It's still a good idea to monitor what the actual live user performance is. And if you've actually used this plugin, you might notice that whenever you compare the scores that the Lighthouse plugin provides. And if you compare that with the actual Chrome Lighthouse, you might see that the scores are massively different. And that's because the configuration that the Lighthouse CLI is using, it's to emulate like a much more like slower network. So if you see that there's a big difference in the scores, then it's that. So the configuration that the Chrome Lighthouse is using is very different compared to what the Lighthouse CLI is using. But of course, you can override this. So you just need to look at the Lighthouse CLI documentation on how you can do this. Now, my next favorite plugin is Cypress's ability to integrate visual testing plugin, so we can also perform some visual checks on our pages, whether we want it on a single browser or in a different like cross browser checks. Now, Cypress has a vast collection of plugins for visual testing. So the plugins range from third-party plugins such as Aptly Tools, Percy, or Hapo, or there's also plugins that are created by the community. So personally, I've used quite a few plugins like on this list. And I've actually written a blog post on what are the things that you have to consider when doing visual testing. I'm not sure if I have it on the next slide, but if anyone who's interested on what are the key things that you have to consider when introducing visual testing, then I can send over that link. Now, because our time is quite limited, so I would really love to talk about all the different plugins, but because we only have an hour, what I'll do is I'll focus on one of the plugin, and that is called Aptly Tools. Aptly Tools is so it's a visual testing tool, but it uses AI comparison algorithms. So whenever they compare the images, they are just compared just like how we would compare images. If you have used like pixel by pixel comparisons tools, so let's say it compared your page and there's a 1 pixel difference. Because it's pixel by pixel, even if it's just 1 pixel, your test will still fail. So this is why Aptly Tools is quite handy in that area, because you don't have to worry about this like small pixel differences, because if it's something that is similar from what our eyes can see, then that is something that Aptly Tools would be able to like compare as well. With Aptly Tools, you can also validate visual differences on a wide range of browsers, on wide range of viewports and like mobile devices. And because they have different comparison algorithms, you have different options as well to compare images. It can handle dynamic data or animations, or if you just want to compare the layout but not worry about like what the actual like elements are inside, then it's quite like configurable from that point of view. Now, in order to integrate the plugin into your Cypress project, you just need to first install the iCypress package. And after you've done that, there is a magic command that you can run on your terminal. And this command is called npx iSetup. When you run this command in your terminal, this will magically add all the required configuration needed to start using Aptly Tools in your Cypress test. So this will introduce some additional code in your Cypress plugins, in your Cypress support file. If you're using TypeScript as well, then a specific TypeScript file will be created, so you don't have to worry about those, because these are automatically like handled for you. And that is pretty much it for the actual setup. Once you've integrated the plugin, in order to start writing visual tests with Aptly Tools and Cypress, you just need to basically introduce the following command. So side.ice open, this will initiate the ICE SDK. So in this specific code snippet, I'm passing in some custom configuration such as what my application name is, what my batch name is, and the browser that I want, like the browser size that I want to run my tests. By default, this will actually run in Chrome browser, but if you want to specify which browsers, then you can just pass in the browser name as well. To basically do the actual snapshot, you can just call sci.ice check window. And then finally, once you're finished, you need to make sure that you call sci.ice close to close the ICE SDK after running the test. Now, before running the test, so if it's your first time using Aptly Tools, you need to export the Aptly Tools like token. So if you log in into Aptly Tools, sign up for a free account, you can just find the token there, and you just need to export that because you need that in order to communicate to the Aptly Tools server. So just imagine you've run your tests. We have this API here. So this API basically returns different images every day. And because it's a third-party API, we don't have much control of the data that we are returning. Looking at the Aptly Tools dashboard here, we have a baseline image, which you can see on the left, and the actual test image, which you can see on the right. Now, if you look closely, the image gallery from the baseline image is actually different from the test image. And I've already mentioned that this happens because the API returns different results every day. The good thing about using Aptly Tools is you can apply a layout region, so the actual data will be ignored. Now, if the overall layout of the image gallery has changed, so let's say rather than like a rectangle, we've changed the layout to something else, then Aptly Tools will then report it as an issue. The simplicity of this, so let's say if you just use like other visual testing tools, then you need to make sure that your Cypress test is returning mock data. So you've seen on the previous slides how we can intercept like the API call so that it can return the mock data. But if you don't want to do that, then alternatively you can use the feature that Aptly Tools is providing, and that is to apply like different comparison algorithms. So when doing visual testing, it's not just about the tools that you choose. So there's other things to consider as well that you and your team should think about, such as what your browser support is, who's going to maintain the tests, where are we going to store the baseline images, the level of reporting that we want to support, and the overall developer experience. So choosing the tooling is just one part of the overall experience, but you also need to make sure that it fits your developer's workflow. It doesn't basically slow down the entire process. So whenever you're going for, I guess, a POC on what tool to choose, then yeah, just you just need to consider all these different options. And I realized I've forgotten to add the link to the blog post, so I can just send that over chat, or just ping me in Twitter or my blog, that I can send over that link. The final feature is, and it's currently my favorite, and it's the last thing that I've experimented with as well. So there is a experimental feature called Cypress Studio. Now, Cypress Studio lets you write automated tests with minimal coding as possible. So it basically records your interaction to the application that you are testing. If you're quite familiar with like Selenium IDE, then I think Cypress Studio is basically Cypress's version of Selenium IDE. It automates most of the steps required to interact, such as clicking a button, or if you want to type strings or whatever it is that you want to type in an input to an input field, that's also possible. You can check, or you can uncheck radio buttons. You can select options from a drop down menu. And apart from these basic interactions, Cypress Studio also lets you write assertions very quickly. So how can you use it? Because this is still an experimental feature. So what I mean by that is by default, it's not provided to all of the users. You have to set the experimental studio to true. So if you go to your cypress.json file and just, insert a new like property called experimental studio and then set that to true. And that's pretty much it. Apart from that, actually, so apart from doing this, you also need to make sure that you have one of like the latest Cypress versions. I know we're now in version 9, but this was only introduced on like version 6.3, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're still using a very old version of Cypress and you can't see the Cypress Studio, then check that you're using the latest version first. Now, going back to the Cypress test runner, so whenever you launch, the test runner, you can see that there's like a magic wand icon beside the test name. If you click that icon, this will enable Cypress Studio. So I guess this is where Cypress Studio and Selenium IDE are quite, different in a sense that if you want to use Selenium IDE, it's a browser extension. But if you want to use Cypress Test Runner, then you have to use it within the Cypress Test Runner. Once you click that, so I have a video here. You can basically see that, I'm just interacting with my application just like I would normally do. You can see on the studio commands on the left that Cypress will automatically generate these commands. And then if I want to do an assertion, I just need to right click on the element that I want to assert and then select from the pre-generated assertions. Let me just see if I can, because I also want to show that from the Cypress test runner, there is a copy or save commands button here. So if you want to copy the commands directly from from your Visual Studio Code or whatever code editor you're using, you can click save commands and that will update the file itself. Or if you just want to copy the commands, and you can also do that. Oops. Oh, there you go. Now, from the Cypress test runner, so you saw that you have options to either, copy the commands or save it. Let's say you opted to save the commands. So these commands will be added into your tests. And there's some comments that these commands were actually generated from the Cypress Studio. The example that I showed is quite a pretty basic example, but I find this particularly useful if you just want to quickly verify, a feature with a minimal amount of effort. It's also good for like beginners as well. So you can use the Cypress Studio and then you can then learn what commands are getting generated, and then you can play around with the code, see what happens if you change like any of the functions or any of the data. So it's also a great way to learn how to code. Because it's a record and playback tool, there are of course some limitations, with Cypress Studio. So for example, if you want to write more complex tests where you need to intercept, some network calls, or you either need to generate some mock data, then this isn't possible with using Cypress Studio. So apart from like writing assertions, so Cypress Studio can only support the following commands for now. So there might be plans, to add extra commands in this list, but for now it only supports these 5 different commands. And for my last tip, so if you want the Cypress team to improve the Cypress Studio feature, make sure to give your feedback. And if there's any bugs that you found with using the tool or that you might encounter, then just, provide it as a feedback so the Cypress team can then, improve the tool and, how it can like evolve more. And I believe that's the end of my talk today. So I hope that you all found that useful. It's just a small sort of features that I really enjoyed using. So whatever I've demonstrated today, I hope that that's useful, especially like the different plugins that you can like integrate, and especially and as well as with the Cypress Studio. So if you know someone who's currently learning how to code, then I find that Cypress Studio is like a great way like for beginners to understand what are the different commands that Cypress is using. So yeah, I hope that was really useful. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Thanks, Marie, for that talk. So yeah, there are some questions in a slide. Let me try to share my screen so that everyone can see it. Just hide this.
Um, so I guess we can go from top to bottom.
Can
So with the number of plugins available to Cypress, do you have some tips to keep our setup secure? So I know that one of the things that you can introduce is to scan your dependencies for some security vulnerabilities, and it's not something that Cypress can do, but you can, if you have some like security team that's quite familiar with all the different tools. So I know that one of the tools is called Materion. It can basically scan, all the different dependencies into your project, and it will tell you whether or not that has some high vulnerability or not. So you can integrate this as part of your pipeline. So if you feel that you're going to introduce a lot of the plugins, then that's something that you can also start to introduce.
Okay. So currently there's no built-in Cypress for
I
this.
don't think so. Yeah, you have to use
Okay.
a separate tool for this.
For the next one, have you encountered where one plugin clashes or contradicts with the
Next the
other?
other. Yes. So I've been on a scenario before where I was trying to do the setup. I believe it's related with the code coverage plugin, and because our team is also using the Cucumber like plugin, there were some issues around that. But at the end, it was actually to do with how I'm setting up the plugin. So the great thing was I just asked, some of our engineers for assistance, and we did tackle the specific issue. So I think the plugins are all created in a way that it should work alongside, but I know that there's been quite a few not really issues, but there's quite a few plugins that aren't supported if you're writing your Cypress test using Cucumber. So if you're just using vanilla Cypress with Mocha, then you'll find that most of these plugins should just be very easy to install. But if you have like Cypress and Cucumber set up, then you might need to do some work around, because that's where I found most of the issues when registering some new plugins.
Hmm. The next one's more of a general question. What do you think is the one feature of Cypress that makes it stand out among the
Yeah.
other automation tools out there?
Um, I think it's the simplicity of installing it. So, um, I know that with automation, we spend a lot of time installing frameworks, making sure we have the correct libraries. And I know Cypress has a lot of limitations, especially with like not supporting multiple tabs or multiple domains. But if you just really want to get started easily, if you want to shift your automation testing right at the start, then based on what the engineers have mentioned in terms of like feedback, it's really the installation process. Like they spend more time writing the test rather than setting it up. So I think for me, yeah, that has to be one of its greatest feature.
For For the next one, what are the recommended plugins for beginner? I think you've shared a lot today, but maybe
Yeah.
if you have like
Um,
maybe two or three top
yeah.
plugins.
So not the plugin, but definitely the feature is the Cypress Studio. So if you're a beginner learning, how to use Cypress or just how to code in, JavaScript, then I would enable the Cypress Studio because it's sort of like a learning experience for you. You can experiment on what commands you can generate, what happens if you enter like a wrong value. So I would definitely recommend Cypress Studio for beginners. The other plugins, oh, I think, yeah, apart from what I've shared, I'm just trying to think which ones. Um, yeah, I might have to come back to this. So maybe I can, like, if this person sends me a message, then
Mm.
I can, send a much more thorough plugin because yeah, my brain is
Yep.
just fried at the moment.
Just try every plugin.
Yeah, yeah.
For the next one, how are you organizing Cypress codes with multiple
Multiple
projects?
projects. Yeah, this is an interesting question because I know with some projects they want to have like a single um sort of project for all of their automation, and then you can just extend that, so you can then install that project as a dependency, and then you can just use the different commands. So what you can do is, if you find that you have a lot of duplicates, you can create a specific project just for that, and you can extend that into your different projects. The only problem with this is test maintenance. So if there are changes in the selectors, then you need to update it in more than one repo. So there's definitely pros and cons. With our setup now, we've just integrated it in whichever project it needs. So if it's needed on, let's say, project A, we'll integrate it there. If it's needed in project B, we'll also integrate it there. So that will give us um, the benefit that if developers are making changes to their code, then they're also updating our Cypress tests. So you can just organize it by, let's say, different features, or you can organize it in a way that you just, again, if you're using Cucumber, you can write like different feature files, and that in its way can organize it itself. But yeah, I think with multiple projects there's always like pros and cons, so you can integrate a sort of main Cypress project, um but just keep in mind that the test maintenance as well will be sort of higher if you do that.
Okay. And last one, maybe this one wanted to create a plugin. So what existing feature of other automation tools do you think
Think
would be
that
good
will
to
be
have in Cypress?
oh I think in terms of their cross-browser support, so I know that tools such as Playwright, it has better cross-browser support. So I know that the feature to support like the Safari WebKit is underway within Cypress. So I think if they've actually introduced like Safari WebKit support, that should fix most of the issues as to why other teams are still reluctant to use Cypress. Um, Apart from that, I think its ability to support multiple tabs, because I know other frameworks can support multiple tabs and multiple domains. But I know that's like a hard limitation within Cypress. There's some workarounds, but I think that's the feature that I feel that's lacking in terms of like what Cypress provides. Whereas other tools such as Playwright can actually support this now. So hopefully, yeah, in the future we can see that Cypress can now also support these different like extra features.
All right. So those were the questions in Slido. Let me just check in the chat to see if we
Yeah.
have. I think those are the questions. Thank you, Marie. Anthony, I'll give it to you.
Again, thank you so much, Meredith. I think it's been a year actually when you connect to
Yeah.
us. Your first Cyprus session with us is actually last March, and
Yes.
you
Yeah. With
did
Nicole.
yes. So thank you so much. I hope to hear you again
Thank
for
you.
your
Yeah. It's
all
always a pleasure. Yeah.
yeah Thank you so much. I won't be holding you too long because I know it's just your lunch break as well.
Thank you
And
so much. And yeah, if there's any questions, my Twitter is at mcruzdrake, so feel free to ask me anything. Or again, my blog is mariedrake.com, so you can just contact me there as
is there
well.
any chance for us to get the slides or
Slides,
something that
yeah.
we
So
can?
I'll would it be best if I share it with you and then you can share with everyone, or I can just post in the chat?
You could share it to me then so that I could post it
Okay.
in our group then.
Okay.
Again, so thank you so much,
Thank you.
Drake, Rich One, and Johnny. Thank you for
Thank you so
co-organizing this
much.
event.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.